I don't normally release videos in conjunction with holidays, but this year I thought I would. Today, the day this video will be released, is Juneteenth. For those watching outside of the United States, Juneteenth is celebrated each year on June 19th to commemorate the ending of slavery. This is sort of complicated because this isn't the exact day slavery ended, and to be completely honest, slavery never really ended in the United States, just morphed into other things like for-profit prisons and whatnot. The YouTuber Knowing Better made a pretty long but very interesting video on the subject, but it's been informally celebrated on this day for many years and has relatively recently been made into a federal holiday, which means when this video goes up, I'm hopefully sleeping in and doing some real big chillin' because I don't have to work, as the ancestors intended. I'm not here to talk about slavery, though. Well, sorta. If you couldn't tell, I am black. Shocker, I know. I am also from the southern United States, Alabama to be precise. That means I am a descendant of slaves. Yes, I know that just being black and from the South doesn't automatically make you descendant from slaves, but I do have actual proof. My mom's side of the family is very organized in keeping track of genealogy. We have a whole book and everything. It's pretty dope. And they have tracked our earliest ancestors that we have records of as coming from a plantation in Louisiana. My dad's side is less organized in that regard, but considering there is a white family and a black family with the same pretty uncommon last name in my dad's hometown of Mobile, well, I was able to put two and two together. Neither sides of my family have been able to track our lineage from before slavery, aside from some DNA tests that show we are vaguely West African, but that's not uncommon considering records of slave purchases don't really go into that detail. This is probably going to be the most uninspired statement one can make on the matter, but slavery was pretty bad. Devastating even. You would think it would go without saying that being held against your will, bought, sold, bred, killed, and used for labor like an animal is pretty not great. But some of our legislators and a not insignificant amount of history curriculums in the US don't agree. However, considering I am descended from slaves, that means something. Throughout my ups and downs of adulthood, and especially since 2020, it has become apparent to me that being black is pretty hard. Just like in general, not hard like lifting something heavy is hard or like complicated calculus is hard, but rather sometimes there's this little voice, almost imperceptible in my head, that tells me that no matter how good you think you have it, you're still black, and that's an automatic disadvantage. It's really hard to explain this to people who aren't parts of historically disadvantaged groups of people, but just off the top of my head, black people were one of the groups more likely to die of COVID before the vaccine was made available, were the most likely to die of childbirth complications, especially in Mississippi where I live. Actually, for some reason, most of the things I can think of are health related, and wouldn't you know it, slavery is the genesis of that. And although these metrics aren't things that affect me in my day-to-day, like traffic or trying to figure out what to have for dinner, they're still there, looming in the background. Add being a woman on top of that, and whoa, Nelly, you're in for a bad time. Yet, despite all these seemingly impossible obstacles, I'm kinda okay. It's an election year, and one that feels like, depending on the outcome, my life after November 5th will never be the same. I don't let that get to me too much too often, but sometimes it hits me and I'm like, man, what do you even do in that situation? Especially with everything that's coming out about this Project 2025 nonsense. It really feels like as time goes on, more of my hard-fought rights are being taken away from me, and there's nothing I can do about it. One day, though, I was driving home from work, my mind on a million things at once, when it hit me. Kamala Harris, who feels more like a kooky aunt than vice president, had this one video that is objectively really funny, but she's also kind of cooking there. She said,
everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
People kind of ate her up for this, saying she was probably on the sauce or a gummy or something, but she had a point. I do exist in the context of all that came before me. And there's a lot of context in all that came before me. My ancestors survived slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and, well, today. I would even say they thrived. I went to high school with a not insignificant amount of people who would later go on to become first-time college and even high school graduates, but that wasn't the case for me. I'm actually a fourth-generation college grad at the very least. I was on the phone with my mom some weeks ago, and she was telling me that her grandparents met at Tougaloo College, which notably sits on land that used to be a plantation, during the Great Depression. I don't think there was anyone in my direct line who were, nouveau riche Harlemites or anything like that. If anything, most of them were probably very middle class back when that actually meant something. But still, that's not nothing. And no, that's not very exciting, but look at what they were going up against. My mom's family is from Mississippi, one of the worst states during slavery and Jim Crow, but they managed to survive for several generations here. While that side is all kinds of spread out these days, I still have like a whole lot of family still here. Aunts, uncles, first cousins, and beyond, despite all of that. And a lot of them are doing okay. My dad, I would argue, saw a lot more racial violence firsthand. Like I said before, he's from Mobile, Alabama, and not to make him feel old or nothing, but he's in his 60s. Although Mobile wasn't at the forefront of the civil rights movement in Alabama quite like Birmingham, or Selma, where I'm actually from, or Montgomery were, it was still pretty bad. The Klan was very active in that area when my dad was growing up, and there's a story that he's told us that I don't think I could ever forget. When my dad was in high school, he was on the track team. Back in those days, they made you wake up mad early in the morning to run around the neighborhood for conditioning, I guess. Either way, one morning as they're preparing to begin their run, their coach tells them they can't that day. The run was canceled. It was canceled because they found a black kid hanging from a tree less than a mile away from the high school my dad attended. He was lynched. His name was Michael Donald. It was 1981. To put that into some perspective, the highest grossing movie of that year was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Diana Ross topped the musical charts. Cujo by Stephen King spent 5 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Some of you watching probably look back on the year fondly for one reason or another. This was recent, not in the times of black and white photographs and horn-rimmed glasses. Very coincidentally, the street where Michael was hanged for all to see bore the name of a different branch of the family that owned my family's ancestors, which I only found out after looking up the details of Michael's death for this video script. It has since been renamed after him. I can't imagine what something like that would do to you. Michael was only 19, only 2 years older than my dad at the time. And Michael was just minding his business, walking home from a convenience store when he was kidnapped and killed by 2 Klan members. How do you even leave your house when that happens, knowing that death could very well be lurking around the corner for you? How do you go on? Although the murder of Michael Donald was tragic and traumatic, it did lead to the Klan being effectively dismantled due to his mother's efforts. I wish he didn't have to die for that to happen, though. But if you read his story, it could have been anyone. It could have been my dad. I would imagine an event like this would give someone mega PTSD, and while my dad has some, let's say, unaddressed things in his childhood, on a macro level, things ended up okay for him. For the longest time, I thought my dad was really, let's say, intense when it came to race issues, but considering what was going on in his formative years, I kinda get it. Though he probably should still talk to someone about it. I don't know, just an idea. I'm very lucky in that I haven't experienced that much direct interpersonal overt racism that the older generations of my family likely had, but the realities of being black still weigh heavily on me. The Trayvon Martin trial is a core memory of mine. Like Michael Donald, he was only a couple of years older than me when he was murdered while minding his own business, and George Zimmerman managed to avoid the electric chair, unlike one of Michael's killers. To be completely honest, most of my internalized anti-blackness was learned from other black people, but that's like a whole other discussion that I've talked about a couple of times now. Breonna Taylor's death left me a little shook up, more so when you realize that just one county over from me, there was an entire, well, let's call it what it is, a gang of sheriff's deputies who very nearly got away with terrorizing Rankin County for a decade. Listen, I work for a news station and I encounter a lot of wacky stories every day, but I truly have to take a step back to realize just how unfathomably horrific the Goon Squad was. And yes, they'll be spending the rest of their natural lives behind bars, but imagine they didn't almost kill someone. My mom tries to calm me down about things like this, very ineffectively, I might add, by telling me, oh, that'll never happen to you. I'm sure Michael Donald thought he would survive the walk back to his house with cigarettes for his sister. I'm sure Trayvon Martin thought he would enjoy his Skittles and tea. I'm sure Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Parker thought they were going to have a normal night at home. They did not. And although, for my own sanity, I choose not to think about these things, every night that I can doze off to episodes of Taskmaster peacefully in my own bed is a blessing. And I don't even believe in those, so you know I'm serious. I will admit, this video was supposed to be a lot more positive than it currently is, but when each generation of Black America has their own Emmett Till or Michael Donald or Trayvon Martin, it's hard to acknowledge how far we've come when each decade it feels like we're being knocked down a peg. Despite all that, while I was in my car driving home that day, the fact still stood. I'm okay. I will be okay. If my bloodline could survive being enslaved, being terrorized during Reconstruction, and during the challenges of Jim Crow, I think I can make it. And I'm not gonna lie, that gives me strength and hope. It actually makes me feel better. It's almost like the direct opposite of my absolute most hated sentiment. There's starving children in Africa, so you don't have it that bad. There's tangible proof that being black is survivable, and I am it. I do wonder, when my ancestors were toiling in fields or laboring in their masters' houses, did they expect this for me? Did they see a brighter future for their children and their children's children? Or were they resigned to their fates? Well, there's no way for me to know because I can't ask them. Because they're long dead, in case it wasn't clear. But I like to think I am the embodiment of the life they dreamed of. I am doing pretty well for myself. I graduated high school, graduated college. I've been on my own and working for almost 3 years now. I am no one's property. In fact, I can own property on my own without a husband. I can vote. I am literate. I am articulate. I can look white people in the eye without risking death or dismemberment. I have my own bank account, and yes, there is money in it that I earned in a profession other than teaching or nursing or nannying or housekeeping. I am outspoken. Despite what it feels like sometimes, I truly am in control of my own life. They didn't get that. If my ancestors can make it without having any of those things, then I think I will be okay. Being black is hard, yes, but not impossible. I don't want to sound like I'm discounting my own struggles or the struggles of anyone else by saying, well, at least we're not enslaved anymore, because believe me, I hate it so much when people do that. Because while we're doing okay, we could be doing a lot better. I've been in therapy for roughly 1.5 years now, and while therapy can have benefits for even the mentally healthiest of people, it's not for no reason. Generational traumas have been passed down to my family in ways that I probably don't even know. For instance, my mom insisted on keeping my hair straight when I was younger because of racist Eurocentric beauty standards, whether she knows that or not. My dad sat me down before I left for college and told me, in no uncertain terms, that I could not bring a white guy home. I haven't straightened my hair in 4 years, and although I have been pretty much entirely unsuccessful, I'm gonna date who I want. We certainly have a ways to go. And while my bloodline ends with me because I am dead set on not having kids, and no, I shall not be changing my mind on that unless I suffer a personality-changing traumatic brain injury, I do have a nephew. He's only 5, but I'm hoping that his generation will struggle less than mine did, like my parents hoped for me and my grandparents hoped for them. Despite all these struggles, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And to all the black people watching this on Juneteenth or any other time of the year, so are you. And I hope you feel good about that, despite it all. I hope you enjoy your cookouts and kickbacks today. I don't know if I'll be going to any, but I know I will very much enjoy not working today, as the ancestors intended.